Ontario Real Estate Association is proud to sponsor TVO. Ontario's 90,000 realtors are dedicated to finding a home for every Ontarian. The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Highway 413 isn't on the ballot, not exactly. Neither is subsidizing transit nor transitioning to a net zero emission transportation system. But every party has a plan, and tonight we'll get the experts to tell us what they think of the solutions being put forward. Then, what this election has to offer for cities and towns across the province. It's Thursday, May 26th, and that's next on the agenda. Across the political spectrum, there's a good deal of agreement that Ontario requires substantial investments in transportation infrastructure. Highways, transit, and getting greener ways to move people and goods all appear in varying degrees in what the parties are promising. Joining us now to size up those plans, let's welcome from Valrita, Ontario, near Kapuskasing in northeastern Ontario, there's Joanne Baril, Mayor of the municipality of Valrita-Harty and the President of the Northeastern Ontario Municipal Association. In Waterloo, Ontario, Jeff Casello, Professor of Transportation Planning and Engineering at the University of Waterloo. In Guelph, Ontario, Martin Collier, founder of Transport Futures. And in Corso Italia, in the provincial capital, Teresa Di Felice, Assistant Vice President of Government and Community Relations at CAA, South Central Ontario. And it's great to welcome at least three of you back to our program, and your worship, way up north. Great to have you along as well. Teresa, to you first, how significant do you think transportation issues have been in this campaign so far?
I think they've basically dominated a lot of the conversation, both with the candidates, the parties, in the televised debates, despite what some of the polling will tell you in terms of what's on the minds of Ontarians.
Meaning we've heard a lot about affordability and healthcare and housing. So I guess I wonder, do you think transportation has gotten short shrift in the campaign?
Not at all. I think there's been a lot of conversation around transportation with the various party platforms related to whether it's transit, roads, operating funds for transit, capital, some different ideas around getting around Northern Ontario, electrification. So there is a lot of conversation, and I think part of that is that stimulus, check mark to sort of say we're going to get infrastructure happening in order to ensure economic stimulus is happening in the province.
Well, you mentioned the north, so let's go there. Your worship, how much has transportation been a factor in what you're hearing about the provincial election campaign?
It is absolutely a huge factor in Northern Ontario. Unfortunately, the platforms don't really align with what the priorities are for Northerners. We're seeing that, yes, the Ontario Northland is on some platforms to reinstate that service, but unfortunately, we're not seeing any movement towards making highways 11 and 17 safer for both commercial truck drivers and residents as well.
Let me ask you a follow-up about the Northland or the train. Yeah, a bunch of them are promising it. Do you believe they're actually going to do it?
It's a plan. I think that their heart is in it, but at the end of the day, unfortunately, it is my opinion that it's not going to go forward. Because? I think it's the ridership is one issue. The Northlander is kind of like a milk train. It is slow. It will take in between Timmins and the GTA, approximately 12 hours overnight to travel to Union Station. That will certainly make ridership lower. I think that as well, we're in a state where people these days we're spoiled. We're used to using our vehicles. We're used to getting there faster and having the flexibility to travel from one place to the other. So unless the price of gas goes up substantially, I think that we'll still want to take our own vehicles to travel to Southern Ontario.
I think a furry beast just made a cameo in the background of your shot, Your Worship. I think I saw that. Anyway, please welcome him or her to the broadcast at your convenience. Jeff, let's get you in here. How, in your view, has the pandemic changed the way that you look at transportation in the province? You've been on this program many times in the past talking about it, but I presume things are different post-pandemic.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. As we come out of the pandemic, we have been spending a lot of time thinking about how we get around. And certainly public transit during the pandemic has suffered. People are just, uncomfortable being in what we might call mass transportation. It just wasn't a really viable option during the public health emergency. But what's happened, Steve, is that we've seen really major growth in active transportation. So we've seen much more walking, much more cycling. This is just a way both to get out of the house during the lockdowns and so on. And people who have never experienced that as a way to commute or commuting from home are now seeing these modes as a much more viable alternative. So I think as we come out of the pandemic, it's going to require a major rethink. I hope we don't default back to the auto dominance that we've seen for decades now. I hope that active transportation will continue to be a viable opportunity for people who want to travel, and I hope that public transit, returns to its pre-pandemic levels and continues to grow.
Well, let me ask you about that, Jeff, in a follow-up here, because the levels of people, the numbers of people taking public transit these days are still off from what it was pre-pandemic. Mm-hmm. Does that make you question whether it's wise to be spending the tens of billions of dollars on mass transit that are in, frankly, all of the parties' platforms?
Yeah, you know what, Steve, I think that the numbers are off, but I think the peak numbers are off because commute times are different now. We don't have the same volume of people who are traveling in those work hours from 7 to 9 a.m. and from 4 to 6 p.m. But I think if you look at off-peak values, I think that you would see actually a small increase in the transit ridership. And so I don't think we need to throw the baby out with the bathwater here. I think that public transit is going to continue to be a really important transportation mode, a viable alternative. It's low cost, low impact, all of the really positive attributes that's made it part of the political platforms for so long. So I think we just have to take a breath, see what transit ridership looks like in a year or in 2 years when things get settled again. And I expect that it's going to continue. And I don't think it's a misstep by the political parties to have this as major platforms.
Gotcha. Martin, one of the reasons we wanted you here is that you host, you host an all candidates debate about transportation issues with the major parties. But of course, I gather the Tories were a no-show for you, as they were for us throughout this campaign. So you had 3 of the 4 there anyway. And I'd love you just to give us your sort of general takeaway from what emerged from your debate.
Well, we had a great discussion, and already the other folks on this panel have sort of mentioned them. We looked at just about everything from, the traffic congestion to transit to infrastructure to the environmental impacts. Equity issues came up almost in every single question, whether, with Highway 413, is that $10 billion maybe it might be spent on that? And is that the right allocation of money when there are many other needs and priorities, both in transportation as well as in other issues like around education and the need for schools to be rehabilitated and those kinds of things. So there was, I guess, a lot of trying to sort of connect the dots between all the sort of different issues. And I guess for Transport Futures anyways, what we've always been trying to say is, look at how can we use the existing system more efficiently, use the existing infrastructure more efficiently through pricing, through other demand management measures, so that we can actually get people to use the transit. So right now, I think they're looking at spending, at least the government, the incumbent government is looking at spending maybe up to $60 billion on transit, but can we get people into that? So into that transit that's going to be built in the future. But if we're also building $10 billion highways, and it's not just 413, there's highways in all the maybe not the Greens are the only one that don't have it, highways in their platform. But you can't be doing both at once. You have to focus on one. So I think we tried to cover that as well as in goods movement as well.
Right. Just to confirm, the 3 parties that showed up to your debate are all against building the 413, and did they convince you of the rightness of their path?
I think they definitely agreed with each other, and they didn't really have to convince me personally. I agree with that, but I think it's just how we move forward, as well as looking at the transportation system across the province, and up north, and because there's a lot of money that could be used for other things. So and like I said, the other parties do have highways in their platform. There's Highway 7 out here where I am in Guelph. Between Kitchener and Guelph, and that's going to be another $1 billion just for 18 kilometers of highway there. So the other parties do agree with that. So the Greens were the only ones who might be in disagreement with that one.
Well, let's, I mean, all of the parties have had a great deal to say about transportation in this election campaign. They got a lot on their platforms, but we're going to just sort of summarize it with 3 bullet points per party. And we're just going to take a moment here to go through the 4 major parties in order of precedence from the last House. So, Sheldon, let's get going on this. Here's what the PCs have on offer as it relates to transportation promises. $25.1 billion for highway construction, that over a 10-year period. $61.6 billion over 10 years for public transit construction. And, as we discussed earlier, they promised to bring back passenger rail service for Northern Ontario, the Northerner. The NDP, let's see what they've got on offer. They would create a zero-emissions vehicles strategy, transition to the public provision of winter road maintenance, and subsidize 50% of the operating costs of municipal transit systems province-wide. The Liberals, you have certainly heard a lot about this first promise, cut transit fares to $1 a ride until 2024. That's the so-called buck a ride province-wide. They would expand GO Transit and the electrification thereof, and they also have a provision for high-frequency rail in their platform. And the Greens, as Martin just suggested, yes, stop building new highways is point number 1. Create dedicated truck lanes on Highway 407 and support regional fare integration. And yes, all 3 parties are against, the 3 progressive parties, that is, are against building the 413. The PCs would be the only ones in favor of that. Okay, let's get some feedback on this. Teresa, what do you like about what you just heard?
I think there's some really good conversation happening around transit. It sounds funny to hear from the Canadian Automobile Association.
I was just going to say, you're the Automobile Association. What are you doing plugging transit here?
Yeah, I think for us, it's about, however, it's about the mobility of how people get around. Our members are not just car drivers, they're transit drivers. They walk, they go on bicycles. So, and we've actually, had a seat at the table, even with the previous government on the transit investment strategy. So what's the big thing that everyone needs to talk about is we've underfunded transit for a really long time. These are some significant investments in transit, especially in the capital build. Of course, the conversation always leads to who's going to pay to operate it. You can build it, but how's it going to get, how's it going to run? And the thing is, that is a challenge. But in terms of the growth that is expected in the GTHA and other parts of the province, we do actually need the infrastructure because we can't move everybody in cars. And so we're going to have those options. And I think some of the other concepts that have arisen to date struggle because there aren't viable options to make it convenient to travel by transit.
Can I assume you're pro Highway 413 construction?
No, you can't assume that.
That's why I'm asking.
Actually, we're not taking a position on the highway builds. It's not in our wheelhouse to sort of pick and choose projects. There's a lot of conversation happening. I think for us, it's what's safe, what is actually going to get people moving in the most efficient ways. How do we I agree with a lot of the other panelists in that we need to maximize what we have. But I will say some of our reports have indicated that there are times where you do need to build in order to address current demand if supply isn't enough, as well as forecasting for the future.
Okay, Mayor Barry, as you look at it, those 4 transit options, what do you see that you like?
Well, the parties are proposing new highways and new lanes in Southern Ontario, but the party platforms, in my opinion, should focus on building and maintaining highways 11 and 17 to support heavy commercial vehicle transportation. The NDP are proposing upgrading winter road clearing standards, and also there's a pilot that's being proposed for a 2+1 short section of the highway. But that just won't cut it. Training and rest areas and patrolling and inspections and integrating GPS technology, the list is quite exhaustive of what we need in Northern Ontario. For example, our community hosted evacuees for Kashechewan First Nation just a few weeks ago. Reconciliation is part of our strategic plan, our little teeny weeny little Valrita Hardy, a town of just a little over 800 people. We take reconciliation seriously. I was very disappointed when I read the platforms. For Northern Ontario remote communities, winter roads and air transportation, they're vital lifelines for fuel and basic amenities and access to education and health. So no mention of northern communities was really disappointing for us.
Do you find that surprising, given that the Conservatives have 3 cabinet ministers from north of the French River?
Yes, I do find it surprising, but I don't think it's what the voters want to hear. I think they want to hear about new builds and widening of roads. But, you know, for more than 1,500 kilometers, the trip to market for Northern Ontario roads, we move critical raw materials, essentially to every sector of Ontario's economy. We create high-paying jobs in Southern Ontario to make cars and computers and appliances and concrete roads and, my gosh, electric transmission lines. So, you know, building and maintaining highways 11 and 17 has to accommodate heavy commercial vehicle transportation. We're finding that seasoned professional drivers that are driving these big rigs have decided to change jobs. They've decided to change trades altogether because they're finding that highways 11 and 17 are too dangerous. We're getting new drivers coming in with little training and no experience on a single lane highway transporting these goods to Southern Ontario. And we've had terrible accidents and loss of life. And kids don't want to take the roads anymore to go to school. Parents don't want their kids to take the roads to go to school. So there is a lot involved with highways 11 and 17 to get goods to market.
It is odd that nothing has happened on that file, particularly Highway 11, given that it goes right through North Bay, which is Vic Fideli's riding. He's one of the senior-most cabinet ministers in that government. Okay, we just put that on the record for what it's worth. Jeff, you saw the 4 platforms. What do you like?
Well, you know, Steve, I think that first, let me tell you what I don't like. I think Highway 413 is an absolute disaster for the province. I just feel like, you know, we are probably the only major government structure globally that are thinking about investing that level of monies into the infrastructure. And as other panelists have talked about, there's a huge opportunity cost associated with what we would spend. $25 billion could certainly improve the Northlander, it could certainly improve transit, it could certainly improve active transportation. So I think that's probably the most important thing that people should think about as they look at the transportation platforms. I very much like the investment in the physical infrastructure for public transportation. I think the PC's heavy investment in the GTA and the expansion of the GO system, the upgrade of the GO system, this makes a lot of sense to me. I do think that the PCs need to think about it, and I think Martin would agree that we need to think about new revenue sources as ways to pay for this massive highway construction that pushes down a bit more the user fees associated with using highways. We can't continue to publicly subsidize highways at the levels that we've been doing so for the last decade. So, you know, I'm happy to see the continued investment in public transportation. I'm happy to see the Greens' emphasis on Vision Zero. That's an important outcome, safety for our pedestrians and cyclists in our urban centers. But I think the 413 is really problematic.
Well, Martin, in fact, the Conservatives are proposing to take the tolls off some of those current pay highways. What do you think of that idea, and what else you've heard here?
Well, on that, they've already taken them off the 412 and 418. I think that was a big mistake. That's to build those highways, just the 2 of them, which is maybe 12 kilometers in total. It's like $1.5 billion, and it was supposed to be paid off over 30 years by the drivers who benefited from that highway, but instead people from the north and east and south are subsidizing them now. And those highways actually would never even been built had it not been for the P3 model that they had. That would have taken another 25, 30 years to be built. So that's a huge mistake. I think on the other things, it's whether they are putting about 60 billion or so, you said, into transit projects, but about 28 billion of that's just going to the 4 in Toronto. And are those actually even the best projects? So there's whether they had to build a subway out to Pearson, the LRT out to Pearson, which will be partly tunneled, and the cost of doing that. There's so many ways we could have done it to actually save money, still get transit out there. But so it's just how they do the projects, whether they're doing it in the most efficient way to free up money. But it seems that money is not a problem when it comes to transportation. It's incredible that we could do so much more. In terms of the Liberal platform, I think that the Buck a Ride, it's a nice branding thing, but I guess what I'm concerned about is people have all sorts of different income levels, and most people can actually afford the $3 fare, and so you have to target that. If you're going to have Buck a Ride, target it to the low-income folks who, the frontline workers who have to take transit, because most people just want a reliable transit system, a system that comes, every 10 to 15 minutes, and they know the transit's going to be there as opposed to waiting for an hour. So I think that's kind of a crazy thing, and I don't know what they're going to do in 2 years. Are they going to be able to take that off? And so that's the same thing. I think most of the parties, except for the Greens, like the idea of reducing the gas tax, by 5.7 cents until the end of the year. But I just don't see how, once they've done that, no matter which party gets in, how they're going to all of a sudden increase it, because by the end of the year, inflation's even going to be worse than it is now. Like, the gas prices are going to be higher. So I don't know how they're going to all of a sudden say, okay, now we're going to take that 5.7 cents and put it back on again. So I don't agree with that. I think the Greens definitely have the best idea in terms of highways, saying no more highways. And like Jeff said, the Vision Zero, they've really connected the dots with climate change in the north. As the temperatures increase, those roads in the wintertime are actually going to get more dangerous, because you're going to get sort of the freeze thaw and sort of ice building at that sort of level of temperature. And so the Greens are actually considering that aspect too. And that's another reason why those existing highways have to be upgraded. And I would say they should also be priced, so the people who can have other means of getting around, or maybe teleworking, don't have to be out there, so the goods can get to market.
Okay, I want to pick up on Buck a Ride province-wide, because I saw Jeff shaking his head when you said what you said, Martin. And to that end, Jeff, the Liberals in their plan are budgeting, I think, basically $1.7 billion for 2 years. The idea being, if we make riding public transit cheap enough, those who are sort of hesitant about getting back on it will give it a try, like it a lot, stay on it, and then I guess in the third year, the Liberals would figure out whether they're going to put the prices back to normal or subsidize it further or what. You're shaking your head, meaning, at least I inferred from that you're not really sold on this.
No, I don't think it's a very good idea, Steve. I'll tell you why. I think that the price of riding public transit is not often the barrier to using public transit. The quality, the reliability, the connectivity, the frequency of the service, those are the things that matter the most. And I think Martin said it really well. Many of us can't afford to pay for our transit passes per month. There are targeted ways to help those for whom the cost of transit is the barrier to using public transport. But I think that this is a populist message that is trying to mimic the PC's Buck a Beer, Buck a Ride. These are very simple messages that the campaign is trying to promote, and I don't think it will have the impact. In fact, I think the platform talks about generating 400,000 new rides with the reduction in fares, and every formal elasticity study, which measures the change in demand as a change in price, suggests that we are very inelastic to prices for public transit, meaning you can change the price a lot and you won't see a lot of difference in the ridership.
Your Worship, I want to ask you about electric vehicles, because, of course, all of the parties have had something to say about that. We didn't have it in our graphics earlier, but the fact is 3 of the 4 parties, the 3 so-called progressive parties, are offering significant subsidies to encourage people to buy electric vehicles. The Conservatives have put massive subsidies into building EV facilities, recharging stations, battery manufacturing plants in the province. Yep. This is after, of course, ripping all the charging stations out when they first came into power, but that's another story. My question is, Well, let me put it this way. I drive a Chevy Volt. It gets 60 kilometers of battery power in the summer and about 35 in the winter. So needless to say, I want to ask you about Northern Ontario and how much you think EVs would work in a place where it gets very cold.
Well, cold weather, it cuts EV range by over 40% when the heater's on. So, buyers of EVs who live in Northern Ontario have to get a car with a range that's about double what their daily driving needs are, so that they're not left stranded in the cold. I see more potential for electric cars for travel within northern communities rather than in between them. But EV charging infrastructure needs to come first. And currently there's no plan by Hydro One and OPG, who own the EV charging network, to build more stations along highways 11 and 17.
So you need to see a lot more progress on that infrastructure before you're prepared to back EVs for the North. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
Okay. Teresa, how about for you on that? Are EVs the panacea that certainly all four parties are suggesting they will be to our future?
I think we have to be ready for it. I think people are interested, but they're still holding a lot of stigma from the first round of EVs, and maybe your Chevy Volt, as you said. EVs have come a long way in terms of range. You can get a lot more charge than you could a number of years ago. Battery isn't the same issue, or the length of the battery life isn't what it was or what was believed when they first came out. I agree with the mayor that charging infrastructure is huge, and unlocking the materials to really actually help the technology evolve. Yep. We're seeing, a lot of interest in terms of knowledge about electric vehicles and understanding what's out there. People are, especially with gas prices being what they are, and that's not expected to change in the foreseeable future. In terms of the electorate, some of the data that we have suggests that it's not high on people's minds in terms of a response to, other issues around climate change and things like that. But it's there, just not as popular as some of the other topics that they want to hear about.
Jeff, I want to get your take on that in this regard. Obviously, if you can replace all the internal combustion engines on the road with electric vehicles, you're doing a heck of a lot to help with pollution. On the other hand, you're not doing a heck of a lot to reduce the need to build more highways or sprawl. So how do you figure out that equation in your world?
Yeah, so we've done a lot of work looking at this. So the academic community has done a lot of work looking at this. And really, Steve, it is right that during operation, you're not producing any pollution out of your electric vehicle. And that's certainly a benefit because you're operating in high density areas, air quality is much better. But the carbon footprint of the battery, the carbon footprint of the whole vehicle, the carbon footprint of the infrastructure that you're driving on is as bad, and maybe in some cases even worse, than internal combustion engines, depending on the battery technology and the source of the minerals and the whole life cycle of this. So for me, what the EV movement is really doing is it's allowing people to maintain their existing lifestyle, their existing reliance on automobiles, and not changing at all their behavior to try and achieve sustainability goals. And I get it that it's really attractive for Ontario because of all the manufacturing that also happens here. So if we can build battery technology, if we can build infrastructure charging stations, if we can build EVs, that's going to really resonate with the electorate because the voters are going to see new jobs, new economy building things. But ultimately, EVs I'm really skeptical about their overall impact on improving our sustainability of our transportation system.
We're making a multi-billion-dollar bet on the opposite. You concerned about that?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me. I think that there are certainly places, like I can imagine Highway 401 with every freight vehicle, and it's easier for these folks to do it, who all the tractor trailers would be electric powered. Now that would be impactful because the diesel that they're using is problematic, and these are really high volume and high fuel consuming. And so this would be a place, and because they're fleets, they can be managed much more easily. But for individuals, this is even if EVs become completely pervasive in society, I don't think we've solved our transportation problem. And I think the bet that the province is making and all party platforms are making it's a pretty risky one. I wouldn't support it.
Okay. Martin, we've talked a great deal right now about public transportation and about driving. And I want to ask about other ways of getting around, namely cycling and walking. Do you see enough in the major party platforms that address that issue?
Just about zero. In most of the party platforms, I think the Greens have been talking about. I saw something the other day about where they're going to support municipalities to sort of green space. But they were talking, I think, more about sort of greening sort of parking lots and off-road things. But I was thinking if they could also focus a little bit on the right-of-way and greening the right-of-way just to make it nicer to walk, a nicer environment, add trees, narrow roads where you can to provide more space for biking. And I was mentioning to one of the producers there yesterday that I have a street, and it's actually right behind me on this map, that called Speedvale in Guelph, and they could have redesigned that road for about $7 million back in 2013. They said it was going to be built in 2017, and today it's still not built, and it's up to about 25 million just for 1 kilometer, and they're widening it, and they've actually cut down 40 beautiful trees, and obviously impacted property values along there. So these are the kinds of things that could be done, but I don't see anything like that being done in any of the platforms, really. If I could just talk about the EVs just for 1 second, one thing that I'm most concerned about is what happens with the gas tax. If we're cutting it by 5.7 cents, and as I said, I think that's going to continue, and then electric vehicles come along which actually don't pay any gas tax, what's going to happen to some of the money that goes to transit and to road infrastructure that comes from that? And so this is another place where I get on my bandwagon to get about road pricing. Places like Oregon, California, Virginia, even the UK is looking at what does this mean for total revenues over time as electric vehicle fleet is pervasive. And so we got to look at another revenue tool to do that. And obviously the road usage charges where people pay, I calculated in Ontario, it would be probably about 3 cents a kilometer to actually, wherever you are, whether it's a highway or a municipal road, even a dirt road, you'd actually be paying something for a kilometer that you've driven. And that money can be allocated to those municipalities to maintain and upkeep their roads and build if you have to. But I'm sure with pricing, we're not going to have to build or expand any roads anymore because people are going to start taking transit and biking and walking more.
We've got just a little over a couple of minutes left here, and I wanted to ask Mayor Barry, if you got whoever the next premier is after June the 2nd, buttonholed in a conference somewhere in the corner and had 2 minutes to make a pitch to whoever that is on what you want, okay, what's at the top of your list?
Build up the northern corridor that supports Canada's wealthiest province. We have the most mature and diversified industrial economy. And the road to recovery for the entire province, rather than building more roads in southern Ontario to get more cars on the road, we should have a strategy to get the cars off the road. And public transit definitely is one of the key issues. E-transit, I believe, is perhaps one of the things that we should be looking at, but we have to look more closely into LNG and CNG technologies as well, because there are some fleets moving to that technology, which is actually cleaner. But I would say invest in northern roads.
Jeff, you got 30 seconds at the same conference with the same premier. What are you going to tell him or her?
I think, Steve, we have to consider transportation as part of the holistic planning for our province. You talked about coming out of the pandemic, and we talked about unaffordability of housing, about equity, about healthcare. But transportation influences all of these things. If you're in a place where you can easily travel at low cost, low impact modes, then you can access healthcare, you can access low priced housing, and so on. So don't think about these things in isolation, but think of them holistically as a system, and think about how we move people from the north and goods from the north. And the way that you do that is you ask people to pay their fair share. And I agree with Martin on road pricing is incredibly important. You allocate that money to make sure that there are viable alternatives so that people can have these choices. You make walking and cycling safe, and you have to think about it holistically. You can't simply put all of your eggs in a single basket and say that's the solution. Gotcha.
Bravo.
From left to right, top to bottom, Mayor Joanne Barry, Jeff Casello, University of Waterloo, Martin Collier, Transport Futures, Teresa Di Felice, CAA, South Central Ontario. Good of all of you to join us on TVO tonight. Many thanks.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Municipalities are, as the saying goes, creatures of the province. That means during a provincial election, the issues that matter to mayors, reeves, city councillors, and urban enthusiasts, big and small, press issues they hope might get some traction. This election is no different. So let's find out what's top of mind this time round. With us from the Shakespearean capital of Canada, there's Dan Matheson, the longtime mayor of Stratford, who is not seeking re-election this fall. And in the downtown core of Ontario's capital city, Enid Slack, director of the Institute on Municipal Finance and Governance at the U of T's Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy. And it's a delight to see both of you back here on our airwaves. I want to start, Your Worship, with a pretty basic question. But you know what the heck? Let's get back to first principles here. Explain to us why the relationship between the provincial government and all 444 municipalities in the province of Ontario is so crucially important to what you do. What is it?
Well, there's so much in the Municipal Act with regard to regulation and policy, limiting us on financial parameters, program delivery, and partnerships, whether it be in social services, whether it be with regard to regulation around clean drinking water, that the province sets for us. So they basically set up the financial framework of how we can operate. They are our partner in delivering some of those services. They get to, in the most part, unilaterally decide what that financial arrangement's going to be, and they get to determine at regular intervals when they're going to alter it, and maybe without much notice. So we are definitely creatures of the province. We're their child looking for the allowance for the most part, and we, for the most part, have to go to them on a regular basis, asking for more and trying to justify how programs need to be delivered in our communities.
Do you kind of hate that it's that way?
Well, it's tough to operate, and what we find, one size does not fit all. Small urban centers are definitely different than the GTA and the Golden Horseshoe, as they are in small urban community or rural communities, I should say. And what happens is sometimes the framework that they set works really well in one setting, but doesn't translate well to others. And if the cost formula is the same across all 444, there's winners and there's losers.
All right, let's do a little diver deep on one thing here. Enid Slack, there's something called the Community Infrastructure Fund. What is that?
Well, it's a fund that provides infrastructure money to the small and northern communities in Ontario.
And how important is it to the future of what they're all trying to do?
Well, you know, infrastructure is really important to municipalities. If you look at Canada as a whole, municipalities own 60% of all public infrastructure. You know, that's roads and bridges, it's parks and recreation centers, it's police stations, it's fire stations, water treatment plants. You know, it's a whole range of things that municipalities do. And, you know, there was a recent report from the Financial Accountability Office in Ontario that said the infrastructure backlog for Ontario municipalities is over $50 billion. So that means to get all of the infrastructure that municipalities have into a state of good repair would cost a lot of money. So it's very important.
Mayor Matheson, the Progressive Conservatives are pitching doubling the Community Infrastructure Fund to $2 billion over 5 years. Sounds like a lot of money until you compare it to the $50 billion that might be necessary. So what do you think of that offer?
Well, Steve, it's a great first step, but it's just not enough. 10% of all tax revenue generated in the country end up at municipalities. But we own, as Enid outlined, a vast majority of the public infrastructure. So while $2 billion is a good start, it's just a real dip in the water. It's never really going to make a difference. We need long-term sustainable planning. And the other thing to think about, too, is the province has made us do an asset management plan and to start tracking our assets. And because we've done that, that report has come out to show the amount of disrepair we're in. So we have fixed one side of the equation where we can identify the volume and the amount that we need to spend. We just haven't fixed the revenue side, which of course is always the challenge.
Can you just give us a bit of a bird's eye view of Stratford? What needs do you have? How much money do you have towards those needs?
Yeah, to give you an example, Steve, we have 300 households waiting for affordable housing units in Stratford. and Perth County. This year, the city of Stratford is taking on building 25 of them. So just a small portion of what's needed. That's a $12 million dip. There's maybe a couple of $1 million coming from the province, nothing from the federal government. And we're taking that on as a community and debt financing that. At only 25 units, we're going to be a long time dealing with our backlog in social and affordable housing.
Gotcha. Enid Slack, not every municipality of Ontario's 444 is treated the same. For example, the capital city has something called the City of Toronto Act, which was an act passed by the Ontario legislature that treats Toronto differently. Tell us how.
Well, under the City of Toronto Act, I'll focus on the finances. Under the City of Toronto Act, the city is allowed to levy any taxes it would like to levy, with the exception of income taxes, sales taxes, fuel taxes, and a number of other taxes. So I hear you laughing there because, of course, those are the major revenue generators,
right,
and they are excluded from levying them. So what they do levy is a land transfer tax, which, as we know from looking at the revenues, it can bring in a lot of revenues at some times, but it's very volatile. When the market changes, those revenues go down, so it's not a predictable source of revenue. They levy hotel taxes, billboard taxes, but these don't bring in a lot of money.
Well, there was a vehicle registration tax once upon a time, but
yes.
I gather a certain Mayor Ford got rid of that.
That's correct. It brought in about $60 million. A vehicle registration tax, when we look at taxation, there are two parts to it. One is bringing in revenue. The other is changing people's behavior. So the vehicle registration tax is a good example. Didn't bring in a lot of revenue, but it can change people's behavior to get them, to buy fewer automobiles, get in, use cars less.
Right. And Enid, why did Toronto get that special privilege from Queen's Park to do that, and no other municipality in the province does?
Well, I don't know the answer to that. Perhaps it's because of their size, perhaps because they asked for it and pushed for it. I guess there's a feeling that because Toronto is so large relative to other places, that it has the ability to levy these taxes. If others were allowed to levy these taxes, and I think they should be, they might not opt to do it. It may not bring in enough revenues to be worth the effort.
I do remember the City of Toronto lobbying Dalton McGuinty when he was Premier of Ontario, lobbied a lot and eventually got this. Mayor Matheson, I wonder whether the town of Stratford has gone to Queen's Park saying, Toronto got this act to do all these special things it wants to do. We want the same thing. Was that in the cards?
Well, first of all, we'd actually deal through AMO because we're proud to be one of the 443 members of AMO. The City of Toronto is the only municipality in the province that isn't. I think the challenge will be that City of Toronto got their own act, because when you look at the makeup of the legislature, if you win the City of Toronto and probably most of the GTA, you probably formed at least a minority government. So they've got a different deal than the rest of us. The challenge with municipal taxation, when the economy is good, we don't get a real uplift with regard to our revenue. Our property tax levels are assessed every 4 years. In this case, we've been 6 years without a current value assessment update. We are looking at when that is going to start, and it'll probably be next year. So we'll be 7 years using old values. There's, of course, going to be the political storm that comes when those values go up and people are angry and upset. And the province will have the regulation in place where they can actually temper that. And they probably will because of political backlash. And the people that will lose the revenue or not have the opportunity for revenue will be the 444 municipalities across the province who are going to have to make do with less, probably. And I know that's a skeptical view of it, but it's probably the most accurate one that you're going to see.
In which case, let me follow up with this, because the Green Party is proposing, and I quote here, grant all municipalities the same powers as the City of Toronto to levy a local municipal vehicle registration tax, provided that the funds raised be dedicated to transit and to active transportation. Could you sign on to that, Mayor Matheson?
That's a great idea. And it's a really good idea. A good example of that would be seeing the municipalities do so across the entire province. It would give some form of stable, regular revenue. You could anticipate it every year, which is important. To give you an idea, the $1 billion was given back in license plate stickers just before the election. If that had gone to the gas tax revenue and was split amongst the municipalities, Stratford's share would have been about $3 million. we would have been pretty happy with that. So it is a little bit of a challenge. And so any type of revenue generation opportunity would be one that we'd want to undertake or at least review and study.
When I hear local politicians say that represents a bit of a challenge, usually that's code for that was a really dumb idea. Am I overreaching here?
Well, it's a little bit of a reach. I don't want to be too critical of the government. They're trying to do what they do best, which is govern across a vast area of land, different sizes of municipalities, and trying to come up with policies they think are resonating with the voters. But it's important to realize that takes so much money to run the system. And it doesn't matter whether it's at the federal level, provincial level, or municipal. The number is the number. So if you're giving it back at one level, you can expect another level of it to actually uptake that room and to ask for the money. And in the case of $1 billion coming out of the system somewhere, it just means that there's probably some expense being moved on to somebody else to cover, and that's why they're going to ask for that money.
Gotcha. Enid Slack, let me follow up with you on the property tax, because that, of course, is the biggest revenue generator that municipalities have control on in order to bring money in to pay for programs. In your view, how well does the property tax work in terms of raising the money cities and towns need to provide services?
Well, I think the property tax is a good tax for local government. It's a good tax because people, when you levy the tax, you can't move your property somewhere else. So the government always has those revenues. You can't avoid those taxes. I think they're related to the benefits you receive from local services. So if you have park near your house, sidewalks, street lighting, transit nearby, that's reflected in your property value. And so in a sense, your property taxes are paying for those services that the local government is providing. And as Mayor Mathewson said, they are a more stable and predictable source of revenue than some of the other revenue sources available. Even during the pandemic, some people delayed paying their property taxes, but at the end of the day, the property tax revenues were being collected. So for a lot of reasons, they're a good tax for local governments to pay for local services. And there's an accountability there. You know, you're getting these services and you're paying the tax. The problem with the property tax is it's a very visible tax. It's different than the other major taxes. And what I mean by it's very visible is that people get a bill for their property taxes and they have to pay it twice a year or 12 times a year. It's money they had and they have to pay over to the local government. Income taxes are different. I mean, if you're on a salary, you're not self-employed, your income taxes are deducted at source. So when you get your income from your employer, those taxes are already gone. So people don't often know what they pay in income taxes over the course of the year. They may know what their refund was on April 30th, or if they had to pay a little bit more, but they don't generally know what they pay in income taxes. Sales taxes, we know in Ontario, we pay 13% on all our purchases. But, you know, even a tax nerd like me doesn't know what I paid last year in sales taxes. You know, I don't know. But I know what I paid in property taxes. People know what they pay in property taxes. And so that's a good thing from an accountability point of view. You know, you're looking at getting roads and transit and sewers and water and all the services municipalities provide, and you know what you're paying for it. There's an accountability there. But it makes it very hard to raise those taxes at budget time. And then we often see at budget time councils committing to not increasing property taxes or only increasing them by the rate of inflation, even if their costs are going up more than that.
Dan Matheson, is that to say that we like paying property taxes the least because, as Enid says, that's the one we actually have to actively pay, and we don't like paying taxes? Absolutely.
I think what I often try to counter to people is if you were to look at the tax revenue you give the city, and in my case, let's call it $5,500 on my home, I would look around my community and look at the parks, the recreation, the city facilities. I would look at the services that are provided, and I can establish whether or not I perceive value for that. I can't perceive value on some of the larger items at the federal income tax level or provincial sales tax because it's just tough to translate it. And I think it's a communication problem more than anything for municipalities. And too often, I think it's a race to the bottom. Municipal politicians sometimes try to negate things away as best as possible, and in doing so, they don't actually talk about the value they provide in the services. And I think that's important for people. The other thing to remember too is a lot of the services we provide are mandated by the province with a certain service level and asked for us to provide, and legally we have to do it at a certain level, but the funding doesn't always follow that service level agreement they provide.
All right, let's take a couple of the items that are in the party platforms, and I'll get you two to give me your comments on them. For example, Mayor Matheson, the NDP platform has a provision here to upload some municipal services to the provincial government. Now, in your view, what should that look like?
Well, I think social services should probably be uploaded. I would like to see us upload some of the costs as it goes with housing, and of course Ontario Works. Those two are really tough for municipalities to come up with their 25%. And I'd also like to see health unit costs go back up to the province. They set the standard for those services. They are regional in nature, and I believe it's more appropriate for them to cover them off through the Ontario Regional Health Offices or Ministry of Health Offices.
Just a fact check here. Ontario Works is basically welfare, which of course when the economy goes down, the need for Ontario Works goes up. But your property tax levels are pretty flat. So do you get extra money from the province to help pay for Ontario Works when the numbers go through the roof?
No, they have a standard agreement of 75%.
So that's one reason you really want that uploaded back to the province.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
And I would say that in the provision of housing. So as an example, when the city of Stratford, the province divested themselves of public housing 20-some years ago, they were given to the city of Stratford to manage for all of Perth County. We have over 500 units. At that time, they were 30 to 40 years old, and we're on the hook for maintaining older properties with little to no funding available to do so.
Well, I think what you're referring to is an exercise that took place back in Mike Harris's time. It was called Who Does What? And essentially it was an exercise to figure out what should the province do, what should municipalities do, and whether there should be any change in those responsibilities. Enid Slack, in your view, is it time for a new Who Does What exercise?
Yes, I think it is. I was on the Who Does What panel in 1996 that resulted in the local services realignment in 1998. And, you know, I think we need to do a fundamental rethink of municipal finances in this province. You know, the foundation for municipal finance and governance goes back to the Baldwin Act of 1849. And municipalities were very different in 1849. They were largely responsible for roads and water and sewers. And they had a property tax to pay for it, and that worked. But, you know, fast forward to 2022, and you've got municipalities dealing with the impact of climate change. You know, we just saw those storms last weekend that devastated some communities that need to rebuild, and municipalities have to work on that. You know, we've got a pandemic that put municipalities on the front lines when it came to public health and social services and transit systems. We have rising inequality. We have problems with affordable housing. But when we look at the other side, the revenue side, we still have largely property taxes to pay for all of this. So I think it is time for a rethink of who does what and how we pay for it. But, you know, back in the 90s when we did this, we had this feeling that things should go up to the province or down to municipalities. And I think the feeling now is more about, it's more complex than that. I mean, we maybe need to share some of these responsibilities, but be clear about who is doing what, and also that municipalities have the resources to do their part.
Well, let's pluck an idea here from the Liberal platform. Mayor Matheson, the Liberals are offering to review municipal fiscal sustainability and the potential to upload responsibility of more critical infrastructure like bridges and roads to the province. What do you think of that idea?
Well, it's a great idea, actually, because in some communities, the number of bridges they have are geographically a challenge for them because of rivers and streams or other impediments that make bridges necessary. I think what will happen is you'll see some of those big ticket items would help municipalities then free up more money for regular maintenance of regular operations, whether it be roads, water, sewers. The other thing to think about with this, Steve, is the gas tax in the province of Ontario is supposed to be used for, of course, critical infrastructure as it relates to roads. And it'd be great if we were using it not only for public transit, but for some of those big ticket items that are daunting for some small municipalities that require them to do regular inspections on those bridges and to maintain them. In our community alone, there are 5 bridges just to get across the river in our community, and they are expensive to maintain, and that's not including some of the other challenges that go with it when we have 1.5 million visitors a year come to our city and use our roads and, of course, go back to other parts of the province.
We've got just a little over a minute left here, and Your Worship, I'd like to give the time to you because you are not seeking re-election, as we stated off the top, and you've worked in the trenches of municipal politics for 3 decades. Give some parting advice to Queen's Park. You're not coming back, but they are. What's the one piece of advice you'd like to pass along to whoever becomes Premier after June 2nd?
I think you need to look at the municipalities as partners. You need to understand that as an order of government, we're the closest to the electorate. We provide the services that touch their lives every day, and that a more transparent, communicative dialogue where we're partners would be far more advantageous to the citizenry of this province. We have great panels and we have working groups, but I think we need to really work on how those get cemented into sustainable operations and how we actually have continual dialogue and a partnership that is meaningful.
And Enid Slack, take 30 seconds just to say whether or not you think provinces actually do treat their municipalities as partners?
Sometimes they do. Sometimes they take unilateral actions, and we've seen that. But we have also seen examples where they've cooperated on housing and social assistance. And so we've seen both. And I think it's possible.
We love the art of the possible. I mean, that is politics. That's the definition of politics. Dan Matheson, Enid Slack, it's great of both of you to join us here on TVO tonight. And Your Worship, I'm sure we're going to get you on at least one more time before you hang it up in November. So take care, everybody.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
And that is the agenda for Thursday, May 26, 2022. Access to reliable internet remains tricky in parts of Ontario. Tomorrow, has the election yielded any new ideas to fix that? We'll find out. I'm Steve Paikin. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
TVO.org has a brand new look online. For the latest Ontario current affairs from our digital team, from The Agenda, of course, and for all of our podcast documentaries and programs, check out the slick new website at TVO.org.
Ontario Real Estate Association is proud to sponsor TVO. Ontario's 90,000 realtors are dedicated to finding a home for every Ontarian. Explore more sides of a story. Consider it from a distinctly local point of view with journalists who live in the region. Ontario Hubs. Discover more on tvo.org and on The Agenda with Steve Paikin.